Welcome back, everyone, to part two of our general video game discussion, all kind of stemming from the question, aren't all video games today awesome? Of course, more of a rhetorical question, philosophical question to get us talking about other things. This recording was a conversation between myself and a friend Mike. I apologize once again for the audio quality. This is part two. Part one is also posted. There's a link in the description if you want to listen to it. This time around, I threw in some pictures as well. They're for the most part really just random images that don't really sync up necessarily with the dialogue at sometimes, but we'll give you something to look at if you're actually watching and not just listening. I hope you like this post and these last two posts. If you enjoyed it, thanks very much for listening. If you didn't enjoy it, don't worry. Next up is my review of Binary Domain.
So with power that we have today, with what games can offer, I mean, I'm sitting here. I know the PS4 is coming out soon, and I'm just not sure we need another generation right now. I mean, I guess it's been a lot longer than it feels for me for the since the current gen of systems had come out. I mean, I was really late in the game picking up my PS2, but between my purchase of the PS2, which was about 7 years ago, and purchase of my PS3, which I guess was 2.5, something like that, um, like I had my PS2 a lot longer. It felt like before the next launch. Well, I guess I did have my PS2 a lot longer before the launch of the console right now. I'm not sure we've, especially if people are going around saying, we're more interested in IP protection and coming up with stupid ways to try and prevent piracy and just got to pump out better graphics, better graphics, better graphics. It's not worth the time or money for me to bother with that right now. Of course, I might have said the same thing when the PS2 came out, and I have a PS3 now. But where I'm sitting, from my point of view, I don't think we need another generation right now.
I would tend to agree. I would tend to agree. I know the corporations aren't going to tend to agree because sales are starting to flatline for them. But the question for me is, are they flatlining because they've started trickling out information? Or are they flatlining because people truly are bored of the current gen? And I think it's all about forced obsolescence, and in a way, sort of Hegelian dialectic, if I've got it right. Problem, solution, problem. How does it go? Problem, creation, resolution. So you create an imaginary problem, and then sell a solution to an imaginary problem at a premium.
Right.
Right. And I think that's where we're at. I don't want to, be disingenuous to an industry that treats me so well, because I love games. There's only three things in the world that I actually truly love, and one of them is video games, and it has since been a 9-year-old boy. And I turned 42 last week, so I've done this. I've probably spent more hours playing video games than anything else, including sleeping, for for the last 32 years of my life. Yeah, and I'm a recent PS3 owner too. I'm only probably 2009, 2010 when I bought my PS3. I still feel like I'm at the buffet, or at the salad bar, say, or I'm more of a sundae person. So let's say at the sundae toppings, saying I want a scoop with pineapple and I want a scoop with some sprinkles, and there's this massive library of PS3 games that I have not even yet to fully appreciate, while still trying to struggle to maintain, the list of amazing Xbox 360 games that I haven't had time to, digest yet. And then the Wii U just launched, and I know not a lot of people have them yet, but I have to say the Wii U is a fantastic little system, and it's just so underappreciated. If they go that DRM always on route, I tell you, I'm just going to stay a Wii U owner, because I'm not playing that game. And I firmly oppose that you need photorealistic graphics to tell an emotional story. That horse Pucky from that 2K Games VP. I want to look his name up right now. I have to. He's bugging me.
Because I think I'm not usually one to. I mean, I hear stories that they play a game. Probably often it's the Final Fantasy title where they say, "Oh, this game made me cry." It's fine if a game makes you cry. I haven't had that experience myself, but I think the most emotional that I have gotten was with Shadow of the Colossus when when your horse falls into like a cavern. Oh, because he's been with you the entire time, and
That's really? Spoiler.
yeah, spoiler. Sorry, spoiler.
I haven't got that far yet. Okay, you ruined it for me. I'm not finishing that game.
But it's but I mean that was however many years ago when that thing came out. So yeah, it's about and in addition to that, it didn't even have barely any dialogue in it to tell the story either. It was a visual and they told the story through the experience of playing the game. It wasn't about what the characters were saying. It wasn't about I said visual, but it wasn't about the big visual, beautiful imagery. Although it had it for the PS2, it was more about the experience of what was happening and how it all ended up in the end. Is what drove that emotion.
I think even in terms like I don't know if you've ever played Left 4 Dead.
I haven't.
It's for the the 4 people out there who aren't familiar, Left 4 Dead is like a cooperative survival horror experience where there really is no story. It's literally you and 3 friends or 3 AIs have to get from point A to point Z while wading through a literal sea of thousands of zombies. And that's it. That's the whole story. But what an emotional experience when you're playing it with like 3 friends and you're yelling at them that there's nothing in the crates. Get over there. Come this way. What are you doing? And you get to the safe house and you close the door and you hear that little sting of music. And, that sense of elation before you know that you have to open the door and head to the next wave. So, I mean, emotion isn't necessarily a direct correlation on, in my opinion, realism, graphics, story, sound, anything. Emotions just on the quality can be, like you said, it's just the quality of the game itself, like the experiential, the game itself. Like, I've not completed Shadow of the Colossus, but there's something from the first moment you turn that game on, and I've got the remake, the HD remake for the PS3 that I've been playing in 3D.
Right.
For fun, I wanted to see it in 3D. It's just so somber and so sad from the first second the game starts. There's this sense of, so yeah, I found it, almost too emotional of an experience. It's like, I feel guilty, really, playing this game. Here I am killing.
Well, keep going, and it's still worth it to play.
I will
play
one
to the
day.
end.
Well, there's another reason why I'm not ready for the next generation of consoles yet. I can literally walk upstairs and rhyme off 15 games that I haven't had the time to complete. I'm not ready, another console. And I was suckered in and I bought a Wii U because I was, sucked in by the hyperbole surrounding Zombie U, and totally a worthwhile experience. Totally worth the price of admission. Another fantastic game. No story, by the way. No story to Zombie U. And get from point A to point Z, survive, and you are going to die repeatedly, endlessly, over and over and over again. But that sense of tension and drama that this weird little game provides is it's a totally emotional experience.
So these are, sorry, what's that?
Deviated a little.
No, that's good. Like these are all, so we talked a lot about the games that we think are awesome, and that are from, today's day and age, pretty much. But one of the other sides of it, so to say that uh, with the original question, aren't all games today awesome? And that's because most people say, well, people that have gone through the generations over the decades say that games today suck. Well, what makes a game bad? Because I think a lot of people forget what it was really like uh, 10 and 20 and 30 and more years ago. That it was, I think, a library worth of just crap titles. So what does make a game bad, and is it the same as it was 30 years ago? So what do you think it is that makes games bad?
Right. The most heinous act a game does is when it doesn't understand its audience. You know, that's one of them to me. And I think honestly, it's the same stuff that makes a game bad today made a game bad 30 years ago. Control.
Yeah.
The biggest.
The top's the list for me.
Control. Do you ever play any of those PC games where you had those non-auto centering joysticks?
Right.
Wow. That made me just want to, like, I don't care how good this looks. Sure, it was just, EGA or VGA graphics at the time, but they were still pretty impressive to us older folk back then. But when you had those joysticks that were non-auto centering, I don't even think that's a concept most people are even familiar with, who were born in the last 20 years. They were like, what do you mean? And we're going to be real soon going to say the word cartridge, and no one's going to know what the hell we're talking about. You didn't live through the last great cartridge system being the N64, arguably. If you missed that, and say my sister-in-law's fiance, he is like enjoying this program called Hyperspin. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I'm not.
A collect ROM ever created is all compiled in this like almost terabyte sized, once you get everything, interface. Fantastic. And he's just sitting here with his laptop showing me all these old N64 games like he's discovering them for the first time. And I was there for that when it hit. And I'm thinking this guy's, 22, and he feels like a digital archaeologist, playing N64 games. The first thing that strikes me is I feel really old when N64 is deemed classic.
Right.
I sort of lost the thought, but it's to him, he would go back and say, he is one of the people who truly believes that the older games are better and that the new games suck. He's that person. He is that generation. He's 22 years old, probably born in the late 80s or the early 90s. I'm not pretty good at math. And he thinks, with a few notable exceptions, that modern games suck.
Yeah, and to me, what makes them bad are the same thing. Control is definitely number one. It doesn't matter, and no matter what age it was in, if the game looked awesome, for its day, and it had great production values, and maybe even the story was, would have been interesting. If you can't play the thing, then you miss the whole point of having a game, because the point of a game is to play the game. And if you can't because the controls are either non-responsive or they're just set up in a way that's very clumsy, or they your character doesn't move in a way that's fluid or helpful in any sense. Sometimes those games where platformers where the jump is actually kind of too high and too slow, it even makes it harder when you're trying to come back. Like those control issues, like you had said, is probably tops the list for me. Something else is giving an idea of what you're supposed to do next. I hate getting lost in general. That's why my wife is our navigator in the car, because she knows where she's going, and I hate getting lost. And it's the same in a game. I hate getting lost in a game. I hate not knowing what to do next. And I'm not talking about those old point-and-click adventure games where the point is just to try and figure out. I mean, like action games where you should be able to just keep going and move on to the next spot. And when they throw something at you ridiculous that you wouldn't be able to figure out on your own, or there's just no clear direction on what you're supposed to do next. To go back to the old games, there was one called Captain Zap. I mean, if the title wasn't enough to give it away, it was a bad game. Captain Zap. I picked it up for $10 for the Commodore 64, and it had this weird map system. So it was trying to set up like a really fake 3D thing. So you could only move side to side on the screen, and then in the middle of the screen they had like an open block at the top, kind of in between some trees, and at the bottom in between the grass. And if you stood there and pushed up or pushed down, you could go kind of up to the next, over to the next path, so to speak. But it was so easy to get lost. And I mean, I bought the thing. I had the manual, and I still had no idea what I was supposed to be doing in the game. So I never got past the first level because I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to be doing. So controls and just sense of direction in general, and no matter what age it's in, if that's to me some of the top things that make for a bad game, then the things that are the controls any worse today in general than they were 20, 30 years ago? No, I think you got about the same average of games that do it right and games that don't. And sense of direction, well, most games today, that's even easier because they do their best to drop you constant hints if you want to try and deviate a little bit from the norm. They keep popping up reminders in your face. So it's hard to come across a game today that you don't know what you're going to do next.
It brings up an interesting point, and I guess I'm going to have to digress again, and I apologize, but it makes me think of Monster Hunter, the franchise.
Right.
I bought into the hype. The Wii U's a little starved there for a few months. So, when the release of Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate for the Wii U was announced, I got pretty excited. I made my mind up immediately that I was going to get it for the 3DS and the Wii U because I was all into transferring my save and all this craziness. I decided that was going to be my game, and I have basically feel like I've beaten my head with a brick for 60 hours in this game. I've convinced myself I love it for some reason, and I'm starting to suspect I really hate it. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't know what the hell's going on. It has this insane barrier to entry, unless you're, one of those self-starting gamers who are prepared to print off a 200-page FAQ, keep it at your side, or I guess nobody does that anymore. They have their iPad out, but I still like flipping through pieces of paper looking for the, for the next thing, and this game is driving me around the freaking bend. There's no big white arrow anywhere telling you where to go next. And why do I think this game is good? Why have I put 60 hours into this thing? I don't know. It's an unanswerable question for me. And I know I'm going to go play it later after we're done discussing it. And I want to smack myself around for even the thought of it. It's Is it a Pavlovian thing? I hear the bell ring and I salivate like a dog. I don't know. I want to slip back for a second on your point about do we need another? We don't need another one, but they are coercing the market into wanting the next generation. The publishers are bleeding the market out by releasing end-of-cycle trash. They're releasing remakes, collections to fill the cycle until the next console launch. So basically, weaning us off the current generation with fewer and fewer releases. So they force us to anticipate the next gen by starving us to a degree. Back to that Hegelian dialectic, create an imaginary problem, then solve a solution to it. For me, my intention is I'm hoping anyway, to avoid the hype for as long as possible, catch up on that backlog of games I told you about that are still up on my shelf. Shadow of the Colossus still being one of them. I apologize. I feel like half a game by not having finished that one. And in a way, I'm also hoping that Nintendo, and I'm not a Nintendoid by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I probably would characterize myself for this generation as more of an Xboxer. I had 3 of them at one point. Mind you, I had 7 warranties, 7 Red Ring Death, and replaced them 7 times. That's neither here nor there. That tells you how dedicated I was to the library and to the console. If after the second time, I didn't just abandon the thing and go PS3. I'm really hoping Nintendo gains some traction with this piece of hardware because it is just so damn interesting. If you ever, you come down to my neck of the woods, have to come over and put your hands on this machine because the thing really is fantastic. The fact that it also has backwards compatibility to Wii is also another awesome thing. So there's like this huge library of cheap games that I never played because, I bought my Wii and then I abandoned it almost immediately. I don't know. I am so not ready for PS4.
So, so what are games doing today? Obviously people are still buying games today. We know what makes them bad today, what makes them bad however many years ago. But what are they doing now that's really any better? We talked about better visuals. The price is about the same. People complain about the price of games today, but I can find new games today, depending on, and I'm talking about on release. We don't have to necessarily wait for a price drop, but you can find new games in stores for, starting maybe around the $35 mark for, games that aren't just shovelware. And yeah, sure, they go up to about, $60, I would say, on average, if you're not looking at collector's editions and stuff like that. But I remember buying Mega Man from Canadian Tire, Mega Man 3 from Canadian Tire when I was, 20 years ago. And it was still about $50. So the price is about the same. We're getting better visuals, of course. I don't think anyone, even the worst looking game today is amazing compared to the best looking game from 15 years ago. Unless the visuals are done to a point where you simply can't see your characters on the screen, or you can't identify what things are supposed to be, which I think even that would be hard to say is possible nowadays. Things can look ugly, but you can tell that they're ugly just because of how good they look. It's such a beautiful ugly. It's not the same kind of ugly we've ever seen before. So they bring more depth. The worlds are bigger. You get more content with it, and hopefully that will continue, and you don't have to buy it all as microtransactions or downloadable content. But there's definitely more to do in the games today. So what else do you think games are actually doing better today than what we were able to do 20 years ago?
20 years ago? Okay, so 20 years ago, to me the big thing was bringing it all together. And I'll explain. There were games that had a great story, but terrible graphics, or great music, but crummy gameplay. But the fact that the industry has matured to the point where it's bigger than film industry, that's astounding to me, because these were toys when we were kids. This was considered toys.
Right.
And in fact, if you played them past a certain age, you were a target of ridicule. To a degree.
Yeah. You had to wonder, what's wrong?
That guy.
Poor guy.
Playing Double Dragon in his basement. What's wrong with that guy?
It's too bad he can't get out more and get a life. Everyone felt sorry for you if you played them past a certain age. Parents were disappointed. Oh, my goodness.
You could have been so much more. Oh, you didn't sit down there and play Circus Atari. Yeah, I think the only thing really that it's doing better is just tying all of the elements of a strong narrative, basically film. They're just taking all of the things film's been doing for, 60 years, since Wizard of Oz, or however long that ago. It was, what, 35 or something like that when that came out? Like 39? I can't remember.
I don't even remember.
But, that was one of the most impressive for its time. That and Gone with the Wind, both came out the same year, both won same cinematographer. But anyways, that's not the point. That was the beginning of, to me anyway, is tying it all together, with music and songs and performance and visuals and style and just the completeness of the package. We weren't able to do that in, our medium of choice, being, the interactive storytelling and games industry, until, you can't even really say. You still required a sense of imagination to me, in my opinion, and I'm a, hardcore gamer from way back in the day, just like you, in PlayStation 1.
Right.
I never got it. I still found the Final Fantasy 7. I'm going to get crucified for this comment, but I didn't get the Final Fantasy 7 thing. I just didn't, I couldn't deal with pushing next to get the next dialogue box, and, it just didn't work for me. It wasn't an engaging narrative. It was just, there was a barrier to entry. And to me, now that you can have fully voiced dialogue, hundreds of hours of fully voiced dialogue, an interactive score that changes based on your actions, high-definition graphics, all combined in these massive open-world narratives that change and adapt to your gameplay style, I think that's really the only thing that's being done better. It's just you've got the eggs, you've got the sugar, you've got the chocolate, and the pies just taste so much better these days because you can put it together in a way that was just not possible before.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that point, but I can definitely see it, because now, not that I necessarily think that every video game needs to feel like a movie, because that seems to be the big thing. It's like playing a movie. It's like, no, I want to watch a movie and I want to play a game, but they definitely take the right components. Well, some games are able to take those right components to mix it together and make it feel like a much bigger experience than it really is. If you think of, even Doom, I'll go with Doom. You could tell what everything looked like it was supposed to look, but there's still a certain amount of imagination you had to bring to the table to get yourself into what's happening, because they weren't at any point yet then where they were considering any kind of cinematic feel, no in-depth story that needed to be told. They just weren't, for the most part, at least the games that I played around that time, putting as much effort to it as they are today to kind of help, as you said, tie everything together. So for sure, I can see that happening.
Well, but the dark side, obviously, of that same argument, I'm sounding fairly evangelical about the whole combining all of the elements for an interactive experience. Too many games rely on that exclusively and provide, like a puddle deep gameplay. Like, what was it? Like, give me an example. I played 8 hours of that. What was it? Final Fantasy, can't remember which one it was, 13, 12? And it was, the first 10 hours was one big long corridor run, interrupted by, some of the most beautiful cutscenes I've ever seen. But the story was utterly impenetrable, even for the most diehard Final Fantasy fan, of which I certainly am not. And it was like, what is the point of this? I've got to learn the most obtuse combat system I've ever experienced in 30 years of gaming, to endure hours of cutscenes for what? I really questioned my sanity while I was playing this game. It made me think about, what it brings us back to the whole point while we're talking. What makes a game great? Certainly not that, Not that. And I hear the same criticism being leveled at the latest Resident Evil, which I was excited for. I was going to buy it. I was even thinking on getting that archives version with the extra content for $80 because the hype machine was going full bore. And then I smacked myself around in the head and talked myself out of it, and sure enough, the reviews came in. It was this hideous, disjointed mess with some of the highest production values of any game released this year. So there is that evil underbelly of that, of all of it. What do they say? The path to hell is paved with the best intentions.
So with okay, so we know so we cover what we don't like in games. What's making games great today. And I think part of it as well is the amount of choice that you get. For so long, so many games, there was one goal, one purpose, and one way one thing to do, really. There was one gameplay mechanic. You did that one thing, and that was it. Of course, that's being expanded on today in the whole sandbox. Although I haven't heard that term used in a little while, but the whole idea of a sandbox world, all the side missions that are now, unfortunately, it looks like a lot of people just throw them in for the sake of throwing them in. But when it's done well, they give people something to do, something to extend the experience past the main goal, but not quite as heavy an experience to have to worry about for when you're done the product. So that's being done well, I think, which something for the most part wasn't offered in many games over the years. But comparing what games of today to games of the past, how relevant is it really? Because we've already talked about there's point of view, there's where you come from, there's the nostalgia factor. Is there much point in comparing? Well, I think reboots would be a good comparison. If there's a really old game and then they remake it for this day and age, is there a point in even comparing? Is it fair? Because it's a whole new world. It's a whole new group of people that are out to enjoy it. It's hardware that can't do the same thing before. There's even a point trying to compare and even saying the games of today are better than the games of before, because it's so far out of context it doesn't even matter to make that comparison.
I'd say the people who are making that comparison tend to be, I'm hoping you're not one of them, but like the urban hipsters of video games. The guy who goes and buys that curly cord with the old 1977 phone attachment for his iPhone and hangs it out of his back pocket, or the douche who sits down in Starbucks with the record player and cracks out vinyl. I think it's partly that, dare to be different, shock factor, buck the trend, since everything's been done, look at me, look at me. I feel something like that in like urban hipster terms, and I'm not bashing on the urban hipsters, but like there's these retro snobs, like some of the people who are and I'm probably going to pre-order a Wii, just to put that on the table before I say what I'm going to say. But I was watching, Rev 3 Games, one of those video podcasts last night, very much about the Ouya, and it was like a three-person panel, and the one guy's an admitted indie game freak. He buys every Game Jam game that's made and tries everything, from the best of the best, like the Super Meat Boys, to the worst of the worst, right? And he's looking for that. I guess he's just desperately looking for that diamond in the rough. And I'd say he'd be one of those guys who would say, it's old games and it's new games that are based on old concepts are the ones that are that old retro graphical style, that those are the greats, and nothing can mess with the perfection and simplicity of, and thinking in terms of let's bring an Atari into it, like black joystick, red button, move forward. I need more fidelity out of my experiences. You know, having come from that world and having played since Pong, and I need at this juncture in my life, I come home and I want to play modern AA and AAA games. I'm not a graphics snob. I don't mind playing like budget titles. Like I found Earth Defense Force on the Xbox charming, even though the graphics were janky and fairly horrible. Fighting those giant bugs was pretty cool to me, to the point where I even rebought the damn game when it was released on Vita a few weeks ago or a month or so ago. And I don't know.
Well, I would say, now that I'm thinking about it more, and I kind of asked the question, and I kind of agree, now that I've said it out loud, that it probably really isn't fair, because you're expecting, at least for myself, I'm expecting a different experience, because I still have my NES, and on occasion I'll pop in a game and play it, but I don't play it as much as I play, let's say, PS3.
Let me ask you a quick question before you finish that.
Yeah.
When you have that urge, have you ever consciously thought about what was motivating that urge? Was it a time issue? Was it a simplicity? You wanted something fast and simple, or was it like comfort food? Like, I love chocolate pudding, I'm getting some chocolate pudding.
Oddly enough, it's not, when I want to do something quick, I actually go to the newer systems, because I find it's easier to play a quick game on the newer systems than it is the old systems.
Well, if you don't have them hooked up, definitely. All mine are put away at the moment.
Well, it's just because the old games, some of them had batteries and you had password systems and stuff like that, but they were designed to if you were great at them, you could get through them in like half an hour or an hour. But if you're not great at them, which I'm not, because I'm not great at most games I play, they're designed to take forever to get through, especially if you don't have a password system. I mean, my favorite NES game of all time is Bionic Commando. I love it, but you can't stop, because once you stop, then you're done. You got to start all over again. So it's more when I just kind of miss it. It's just a mood that has to strike me, and I got to make sure I have the time, because if I don't have the time, then I can pop in a PS3 game and I can play to the next checkpoint, and it's saved and it's done, and I can walk away, and that might only take 15 minutes to get a quick session in, but at least I know I can pick up from where I left off. So, but it all comes down to what kind of experience am I interested in having, and games, it's all fun, so you can kind of categorize it into that one experience, but if you get into a little bit deeper, it's kind of, what type of experience are you interested in right now? Do I want that nostalgic experience? Well, then, yeah, of course, I'll go for something older. Do I want, something that's a little bit more grand in terms of presentation, or just something new because I've played all the old games? That's why they're my old games, because I've played them. So if I just want the new experience, the next experience, not because it's necessarily better, but just because I haven't done it yet, then I'm going to go to whatever the next game is sitting on my shelf that I haven't gotten around to. So that's why that's part of the reason why I find it's unfair to compare, because it's what that experience delivers. I mean, the experience that an NES game delivers to me now is different than what it delivered to me when I first played it. The experience it delivers now is, a trip back to that day and age. So there's that all nostalgic factor to it, but it doesn't have the same feeling as something that I would play today.